If you have a few minutes, come quilt with me. Hey guys, welcome back to Frances Quilts. Well, this has been a week of free motion quilting. I have been working really hard on quilting this lovely big quilt. If you saw the video earlier this week, I talked about how I set my machine up to be able to handle this large of a quilt. And honestly, I have just had so much fun and I'm so excited with how it looks. So far, I have gotten all of this inside section done. I just have to figure out what to do on these corners, and man, I can't figure that out. So I'm gonna have to do some planning in the next day or two and see if I can figure out how to quilt those corners. But today, I thought you might be interested in just watching a little bit of quilting. It's not very long, just wanted to give you a feel for what I'm doing and show you a couple of the designs that I'm doing. And at the end, showing you the technique for how I tie off my threads and how I bury them. And I have a really good tool I want to introduce you to there. So anyway, if you have a few minutes, come quilt with me. As I said, I just want to show you a little bit of quilting that I'm doing. This inside section, I am working with a loopy meander. It looks like this, sort of. In this case, I'm trying to make the loops a little bit bigger and a little less meandering. I want it to have the effect of being a pebble design without me actually having to quilt pebbles, because we all know those are a pain. Anyway, as I'm going along here, my idea is to just press down the parts away from the circles, and I really want to highlight the circles. As I get into the circle area, I'm going to stop here in just a second, and now I'm going to quilt around that circle, and you'll see that my speed slows greatly down because there's nothing harder than quilting around a circle. Some of them quilted out perfectly, some of them I'm a little wide on, and there's a couple of them that I actually encroached into the circle. If it got too bad on that encroachment, I ended up taking the stitching out and redoing it. And now I'm back to stitching fast again because I have accomplished that circle. Just another view here of how I'm set up. You can see that the area that I'm working on is nice and flat, but the rest of that quilt is just rumpled all over the place. The only area I'm worried about is what is right in front of my needle. The dog grooming bar, you can see here the clamp just to the right, that's holding the quilt up off of the table somewhat, and I just have lots of places that everything is propped up. As I kept going, I decided to use a ruler to do these straight lines with. My lines are 1/2 inch apart, and so I'm using this 1/4 inch mark that I'm showing you right here. And I'm going to line that up with the edge of my, my seam, or maybe the previous line that I quilted. And we know that there's a 1/4 inch between the outside of the foot and where the needle sits. So if I have a 1/4 inch on one side and a 1/4 inch on the other, that tells me that I'm going to be getting a 1/2 inch seam as I stitch. As I get to the end, it's time to line things up again, always stopping with that needle down. And I think that this next stitch is the hardest one in all of free motion quilting, because you want to stay in the hole that you started out in, that you came out of. So you can see I made a little bit slower stitch and then took off again. Again, I'm going to stop. I'm going to reset everything, repuddle, as I said in the last video. I'm going to set my ruler down, and I'm going to take a very careful first stitch here so that I don't have a little jig in that line. I want that line to be as straight as possible. And there you could see that my ruler had slipped a little bit, so I just kind of nudged it in place to get it back to that 1/2 inch. It hadn't slipped by much, so you're not ever going to notice it. I'm ready to turn that corner, and yes, I could do that without moving my quilt around, but I just know that my lines are going to be so much straighter if I can go forward and backward rather than trying to do side to side. So I would prefer to spend the time and actually spin that quilt around. And again, after every time I stop, I reposition the entire quilt so that the area that I'm moving toward is nice and flat. And aren't those colors beautiful? I'm so excited. There, I didn't want to quilt around the rounded edge of the ruler, so I decided to freehand it. It probably would have been better if I just repositioned my ruler, but it worked out okay. So I'm following along the pre-quilted area. I'm going to set my ruler back down. This time that 1/4 inch is aligned with the line that I just got through quilting. Sped it up a little bit here. I wish I could quilt this fast. And as I come around this corner, I stop and realize I need another stitch. And then I'll try to line my ruler up again and decide, no, I actually need a couple more stitches. So let's do 2 more. And I'm going to line the ruler up. And this time I decided not to move my quilt, but just to go ahead and stitch sideways. And it worked okay for a little bit, but then I'll show you the problem I had. This obviously is a task that I need to practice on to get better with. But I will say, if you were quilting this on a domestic machine, you would probably not be able to quilt this direction, so you would need to be moving the quilt around every time. So I get to the end there, to the seam that I've already, or the line that I've already quilted. I'm going to move forward my 1/2 inch, line up my ruler, and start again. And this is where the rot sets in, because when I start my next line, when I start my next section here, I let the ruler jump. And so if you can look and see, I'm going to point to it very quickly. There is a little jig right there in that line, so that line is not straight. So now I have taken and pulled back all of those threads. I'm dealing with little bitty threads to tie off, but that's okay. I'd rather not unsew any more than I have to. So I'm using my seam ripper just to pull those threads in. So both of those threads have been tied off now. And now I'm going to use a tool called a Snag Magic. It is a wonderful tool for burying threads. You can get them on Amazon, but those are knockoffs and they are not nearly as nice as the actual product. So I would encourage you to go to snagmagic.com and purchase these. I think they're $19.99 for 2 of them. And I absolutely love them. They are so easy with that nice loop. It makes it so easy to grab those threads, even if they're really short, like those you just saw. So now I'm going to go back away from the area that where I stopped, and so that I'm overstitching those last few stitches, and then I'm going to come on forward again. Now let's move to this area under the curve. I'm getting to the areas and the parts where the straight lines are meeting the curved lines. I am just quilting around the outside edge of that bias all the way down. And when I get to where I am less than 1/2 inch, I'm going to back up until I can have that 1/2 inch away from the previous line that I stitched. I'm going to put my ruler down and stitch the straight line across, ending back at the curved line. Come forward 1/2 inch, just overstitching what I had stitched before. Put my ruler in place. Well, I hope that was nice and relaxing for you. Most of it was relaxing for me, but there's always a few things that I get a little tense on when I'm doing it. I need to put on some music and sing. That helps me to relax some. If the ruler quilting looked interesting to you, I would encourage you to check out my course, Keeping It Straight, 8 Ways to Use a Straight Edge Ruler. There's lots of things you can do with it. It's an easy way to enter into the ruler quilting world. I'll leave a link to that at the end of this video as well as in the show notes. Be sure and check out my blog at francesquilts.com/blog, and that's where you're going to be able to see this quilt when it's finished and I've gotten all the quilting done and everything handled with it. That's where I will be posting it. So be sure and check that out and subscribe so that you can get all of the information about this wonderful quilt. Well, thanks so much for joining me today, and as always, I look forward to seeing you next time on Frances Quilts.
Remember, if you like what you've seen, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe. Please check out my website and daily blog at francesquilts.com, and I can be found on Facebook and Instagram at Frances Quilts. Thanks so much for joining me. Hope to see you again soon.